I'm Jason Klom, and this is Comedy on Vinyl. The year is 1957, the album A Child's Garden of Freberg, the artist Stan Freberg, and my guest this week is Steve Whitmire. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, I'm very happy to be here, Jason. Glad we could do this.
Me too. Holy cow. Are you kidding? I mean, you know what's so funny is I'm as a young man, I've talked about this before, as a young man, thought I was going to be an animator, also thought I was going to be a puppeteer at various times. And so there are some voices and performances that are stuck in one's brain. Would it be weird, though, if the first one that off the top of my head is Gil, that Gil is from Muppets Take Manhattan is so important to me?
That's so funny because it's important to me too because, as you know, I later went on to be Kermit after a while. Mm-hmm. And the whole point of that character was, all those characters, it was these frogs that were surrounding Kermit. Mm-hmm. And Kermit had amnesia. It's a whole long story if you haven't seen the film. But we were basically just making fun of Jim. Jim was standing there with us, and we were purposely trying to do our Kermit voices, our versions of Kermit. Mm-hmm. And I guess my Gil voice sounds a lot like what my Kermit voice ended up sounding like. So in a way, I got to kind of practice my Kermit voice standing there next to Jim on the set.
I always had wondered because I'm like, okay, I mean, these seem like the kind of group who would take the piss out of each other a bit, and having talked to other Muppeteers, it's obviously part of the thing. I love that so much. Yeah, that is a weirdly, like, I'm in this group of actors, and for some reason, that is a scene that comes up a lot when we quote stuff to each other. I don't know why.
How funny.
Yeah.
How funny.
Yeah. It is. I think it's the Muppet movie that gets talked about least for some reason, but I think it's my favorite probably.
Well, people remember the first one, I think, because Rainbow Connection was such a big deal.
Sure.
Beautiful song, obviously, Paul Williams, and the music. I don't know whether people remember the music from Muppets Take Manhattan or not. That was probably the most sophisticated of those three initial Muppet movies that we did. Mm-hmm. And Frank Oz, of course, directed it. Mm-hmm. And Jim was kind of just a performer on that. Obviously, he owned the Muppets and he was a producer, but in terms of his day-to-day activity during that shooting, I remember specifically a couple of us asking him questions about what we were shooting, what we were doing, and he just said, I don't know, I'm just a puppeteer on this. And he was serious. He wasn't involved in it.
I love it. I mean, the purity of that is always nice to hear. I'm sorry, I'm going to be all over the place because I'm going to have a million questions for you.
Not to worry.
Are you, because it's right now I can't remember, are you in any scenes with Art Carney? Did you get to act with Art Carney?
I did not act with him. I got to meet him there briefly, just a hello, how are you, nice to meet you kind of thing. Yeah. But no, I was not in those scenes. But it was great just to, it's that feeling when somebody like Art Carney walks on a set. Mm-hmm. He brings so much history with him. You just sort of feel this glow around him or something. I don't know.
Right.
There are a few actors like that we've worked with that you just, they bring such a past with them that it's hard to let go of that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, okay, so let's very quickly, we'll talk about the record. Well, don't have to be quickly. We can talk about it for the rest of the episode. But
okay, sure.
The other person to pick, I didn't realize until today, the other person who has picked this album before is Grant Baciocco, so another puppeteer. So this has happened before. I don't know why this is a thing that puppeteers are attracted to, but why this particular album? Where did you first hear Stan Freberg?
Well, let me answer the first part of that first because it clicked for me when you said that. I think a very possible reason that puppeteers would choose this, puppeteers are oftentimes, I make distinctions in different kinds of puppeteering.
Sure.
There's the Avenue Q puppeteering, which is its own thing, but that's basically an actor who has a puppet. Yeah. And most of them were qualified puppeteers, but they're also a part of the act. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's a little bit different form of puppeteering than what we've always done, where we're not visible ever at all. And I think puppeteers tend to possibly be more outgoing through their characters than they are themselves, certainly in a public way. And I know that when I started with the Muppets, I had a very limited range of voices and characters. I was not really an actor. I was a puppeteer, and I could do the manipulation quite well. But in terms of an acting background, I had none. I was only 19. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of puppeteers have less of an acting background and more of a kind of a nerd background when it comes to the actual puppetry and building them and all that stuff. So if you're shy about doing voices, you often look to people who are so amazing with the opposite of that, which is what Stan Freberg was doing. I mean, he did do appearances, of course.
Sure.
I only knew him as a recording artist because I was quite young and he was getting on up there, and his heyday was sort of, slightly fading by the time I got to know who he was. So I was very interested in his work because he did these amazing stories with his music that had a comic element, and you could just visualize what they were. And for a puppeteer, that's a dream come true.
Sure.
Went back when you could steal other people's stuff and use it yourself, You wouldn't do that now probably, but the funny part of Freberg was I chose that album too because Jim and I sort of charted these parallel courses that I wasn't aware of. I mean, I was 22 years younger than Jim Henson, but evidently when he was a college student and started the Muppets, he also used Stan Freberg's tracks on television.
That's right. Yeah.
He would build these characters and he would act out Stan Freberg's material at a point when Jim was just getting started. And I never knew that until I met Jim many, many years later. But I came to know Stan Freberg's work through my parents, who grew up in the 50s. And I was born in the late 50s. And my mom had these old Stan Freberg albums. The one I remember to begin with was The Yellow Rose of Texas that he did.
Yeah.
Which, was two characters and a banjo player. So technically there were three characters, although the banjo player didn't speak.
Right.
And you could just picture what this was. And I actually won a high school talent show with that piece of music using Stan Freberg's track and built the puppets for it.
So good.
Yeah, which kind of set me down the road of this is kind of, I was already heavily into puppets.
Yeah.
But Stan's stuff was so visual without you seeing it.
Yeah.
And to set it to create your own visuals around it was amazing. All of his stuff,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
No, not at all. Not at all.
What do you think draws people to doing this? Because I've even read that Paul McCartney did that to The Great Pretender. He learned to act, he had a whole act out. He did. I've heard of other people acting out to Freberg tracks. What the hell is with that?
I really think it's what we were kind of just saying. It lends itself so strongly to your imagination. What Stan was doing. He had an interesting way of knowing just enough detail to put into what he was conveying vocally, and often a lot of his stuff would be more than one character. He would play one character and he had other people doing the other characters, I think. And I think sometimes both characters might have been him.
Right.
I'm not sure about that, frankly, but it was sort of the Weird Al Yankovic of the time. Take it only rather than doing parodies of the music, he was actually doing the music. He was more parodying the artists.
Yeah.
Just incredible stuff, and funny today, nobody's quite doing that.
I think my favorite, well, here's the thing. John and Marcia is obviously a classic. I don't know if people today would understand why it's funny, but if you understand these old tropes of what soap operas used to be, the idea of an entire track of, and which I think, by the way, this record came out, like I said, 57. I think that track by then was already 6 years old, but it was still his most popular track. It was such a huge thing. But that's my boy. I had forgotten how damn funny this one is. And that is the most Weird Al Yankovic. That clearly influenced so much of who Weird Al ended up being.
Oh yeah, undoubtedly. Well, and the other part of that is too, one of my favorites on there, though I never did it with puppets, was Rock Island Line. I think it's on that album. And you'll hear a character that he does, not the record producer. I wish I could tell you who it is who'd play the record producer. It's probably somebody very famous whose voice I don't know.
I'm trying to see.
Yeah, but Freberg is the artist. And it's a character that he called, I think it was called Mumbles. And Mumbles is a taste of a voice that Jim admittedly sort of took and turned into Kermit. If you listen to that character, it's I'm not going to do Kermit's voice for you, but I'll do a version of what Freberg's was kind of this character who talked like this, and he was you could see how that would form itself into being what Kermit became. Jerry Nelson, who was one of the main Muppet performers, passed away a couple of years ago. But Jerry, we called him the Mel Blanc of the Muppet world. He had so many characters and so many voices that he just tiny changes on his own voice. Jerry tells the story of when he started with Jim way back in the 60s. He walked into the room and he was doing some voices for Jim, and he did that Stan Freberg voice, which was very popular at the time because of Stan.
Sure.
And evidently Jim turned to him and said, Jerry, you can't do that voice. And he said, why not? I love doing that voice. He said, because I do that voice. And it became essentially Kermit. Jim changed it a little, but it kind of became what Kermit was, you know?
That's so funny.
So Stan was a huge influence on Jim Henson.
It also is clearly the influence for Mr. Jinx, if I'm not mistaken. Like,
I'm sure.
You know, that sort of thing in the back of the throat.
Yeah,
That's fascinating. Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah, it's tightening up your throat and that pure sound of this character who sort of talks like. I love that character. You know.
It's so good. It's
that's one of the funniest tracks on the album is Rock Island Line. Because the guy's trying to just. His pronunciations. The other guy makes fun of his pronunciation. It's terrific. It's just great interplay between characters and very Muppet-like.
For sure. When did you first build any kind of puppet, and what made you think that was a good idea?
Well, the only type of puppetry that I was ever really interested in was the Muppet style puppet. That Jim's style of puppetry, which is that. The mouth that moves and the hands that are run by the rods or the live hands. And the look of the Muppets is what drew me to being interested in building puppets. You know, my earliest memories of Jim's work would probably be Rolf on the Jimmy Dean Show. That was the early 60s and I was very young. But it was black and white television, and I would beg my parents to let me stay up late enough to watch Rolf on the Jimmy Dean Show, and they would. It was like staying up late. 8 o'clock or something probably.
Sure.
And Rolf was this big, nobody had seen anything like Rolf before. I mean, there were other puppets on television, including Stan Freberg, by the way. He was also a puppeteer. We can talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
But Rolf was this big, engaging character who, when he looked at the camera, he looked at you. When he looked at Jimmy Dean, he looked at you.
Yep.
Their conversations were, I'm sure they were written to a large degree, but they seemed spontaneous. They had a point. He was a living thing. I mean, quote, living thing. And he was actually real. I mean, you knew if you were in the room with Rolf, you could put your hands on him.
Yeah.
And I remember he had this big black mouth. When he opened on black and white TV, it looked like a big giant hole. And I thought, as a 6-year-old, I think I probably knew it was a puppet. I knew it wasn't a real dog. But I remember thinking, that must be how they get inside the puppet. They must go in through the mouth. Because it looked like a big hole, And so I was influenced by Jim's work from a very young age. And by the time Sesame Street came along, Jim had also done 3 or 4 television specials in the early 70s, which I was just, and at that point, by the way, with there being no internet, the only way to know about these things was in the back of TV Guide magazine, which was actually a real magazine. You opened it up and there was this little page that said, it was like a yellow thing that were headlines from New York about future stuff, and they'd have a little blurb saying Jim Henson has done a new TV special and it'll be on this date, and I would tear that out and paste it on my stick it on my wall and go tell my friends at school. I was such a nerdy fan before the internet.
Yeah. You had to be. You could only catch it once probably, unless they decided to repeat it.
Well, you had your one chance to see it. And you couldn't record it. There was no video to record, no way to record. So my first puppet build was when Sesame Street happened. I was so drawn to already Jim's work, but then suddenly the Muppets were on every single day.
Yeah.
And in Atlanta, where I was from, there was 2 PBS stations. So there's only like 5 channels at that point. Not like today, ABC, NBC, CBS, and a couple of PBS channels.
Okay.
And Sesame Street would run in the morning on the local channel 8. And then it would run in the afternoon on channel 30, which was like a UHF deal. And so it was the same show.
Yeah.
So I would watch the early morning show and I would take notes. And I would say, okay, right after they talk about the letter L, they're going to do Manamana. And I would have my little cassette player with the 2 buttons and my little microphone, and I would record the soundtracks off of Sesame Street. So they'd finish the letter L and I'd push record, and I'd record Manamana, and I'd stop it. So then I'd go off and try to build the puppets, and I would take that recording to school and do these puppet shows for my friends.
Wow.
So I was, in a funny sort of way, when I look back on that, as crude as it was at the time, I was already starting to learn something about production in a weird way,
Sure, yeah.
As a 10-year-old kid.
I love that.
Yeah. And then I wrote to Jim Henson about that time, and he wrote back to a 10-year-old kid and turned me on to some patterns that he had published in, of all places, Woman's Day magazine.
Really?
These really simple little Muppet patterns.
Love it.
For like the Anything Muppets on Sesame Street. Super simple. Which I think sort of turned out to be a little bit of a curse, because those patterns became the patterns for a lot of people who started selling puppets over the next 10 years.
Of course.
You know, all the ones you bought in the store.
Yeah.
Under a different name. But that's when I really started actually learning how to make puppets with real patterns.
Wow. I mean, I don't think I had realized that it was out there in such a public forum. All you had to do is buy this magazine and get the pattern.
Yeah.
It very much changed the definition of what a puppet looks like, I'm sure, in our minds. Because before that, what are we talking about? Usually a marionette or a simple sock puppet. We're talking Lamb Chop, maybe.
Yep, Lamb Chop,
like
right? Yeah. Which was amazing for what it was,
of course, yeah.
She was incredible. Sherry Lewis was amazing.
She's brilliant, yeah.
I'll tell you a story about her in a second. But the other part was, you know, Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, and the work. Actually, we're talking about Stan Freberg. To bring that back up for a second, you know, Stan, long before my time, did Beanie and Cecil.
Yeah, right.
I don't think it was called Beanies. I think it was Cecil the C6 Sea Monster or something like that. But you can find that stuff on YouTube. His black and white television series, and the puppets. The only one that had a working mouth was Cecil the Sea Serpent, which was semi-Muppety. And the puppeteering is great. I mean, it's fantastic for the time, but it's a little bit more crude than what Jim eventually developed. You know, Jim's work evolved in terms of the style of manipulation and the puppets themselves vastly over the years that he was alive, and we continue that after his death. But all of that inspiration, you know, was part of the package.
Yeah. You had a Sherry Lewis story. Please tell me.
Well, Sherry Lewis was shooting, I forgot the name of the show, but it was whatever the last series she did for kids in the 90s. And we were doing a series called Dinosaurs. You know, guys, you know, amazing show.
Of course.
Well, in Los Angeles, and so I'm basically in Los Angeles, and I knew a puppeteer named Gord Robertson from Fraggle Rock, one of our Canadian friends who lives in Toronto and worked on Fraggle, was working with Sherry on her show, and he invited me one day to come by and watch the show. They shot in this little studio, and so I went. I was able to meet her, and she was really something. And I remember saying, so you're the new Kermit. You know, it's kind of like, you know, she had this, you know, kind of fun. I mean, it was sweet, but a fun attitude. She said, yeah, Jim and I were always kind of different. He was more of a people person. You know, he liked working with other people. I didn't like that so much. And what she meant by that was because she was part of the act. She even when she was shooting video, she would put on, you know, two characters like Hush Puppy and Lamb Chop. And she would work with her arms up above her head. And I can't even remember whether she used a monitor or not. We did. We always looked at monitors.
Yeah.
And she would do a scene with those two characters talking to each other, doing both of them and both voices at the same time. We would never do that.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible. So a totally different kind of puppetry that she adapted from her stage shows and her live shows to television. You know, and it worked completely, you know.
That's so crazy. It's always interesting the entirely different approaches that two groups of people can take to roughly the same idea. That's an intense skill. Like I there's not a lot of even comedians or other actors I can think of. I know Lord Buckley was a big like voice switcher. There's some other folks that I can't think the names of, but that is wow. Yeah, that's crazy. That's a crazy skill.
Even when she was shooting, my recollection of that one day when I watched her work was that she was still using her abilities as a ventriloquist. She wasn't moving her mouth, and I think that all I can think is, well, it's what she was used to for one thing, but I think it probably kept the voices pure. It would sound different if she just opened her mouth and talked in their voices.
For sure.
So even when she was out of the shot, she was still not moving her lips. You know, it was really remarkable.
So great. I was wondering, that was actually gonna be my next question. That's intense. That's great.
Yeah, amazing, very impressive. So that was my only experience meeting her, but how great it was to have had the chance to meet her for a moment. You know?
Yeah. Did you ever, throughout your career, get to meet Stan Freberg?
I did. I have some interesting Freberg stories because, not unlike Jim Henson, Freberg was kind of a hero of mine. I mean, my first hero was Charles Schulz. Charles M. Schulz with Peanuts.
Sure.
When I was about 9 or 10, and my friend and I would draw the Peanuts characters and do our own comic books. And I think somewhere about that age, it clicked for me that, I mean, I never really thought that I would work with Jim Henson, but I did have this fleeting thought that, you know, Charles Schulz does this work all by himself. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I think basically he drew his stuff, you know. And I thought, well, you can't really work with him. You know, he's a one-man operation.
Sure.
And for some reason, that sort of steered me toward the Muppets, because there's a lot of similarities between the Peanuts characters and the original kind of Muppet Show Muppets. Their relationships is what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, but Jim, you know, he's got a whole troop of people that he works with. Maybe there's the thing there, you know.
Sure.
And so with Freberg, he was also a hero of mine, just because, again, this inspirational thing that he was doing. So once again, during those dinosaurs years, we were in Los Angeles in the first part of the 90s. I wrote Stan Freberg basically a fan letter. And by then I was doing Kermit, and we had done Muppet Christmas Carol, so I was, you know, kind of established with Kermit.
Sure.
And I wrote him a 1.5-page letter saying, Mr. Freberg, you know, I'm a huge fan, kind of thing. You know, I'm now Kermit. And he never wrote back, and I was incredibly disappointed because I wanted to meet him, but I didn't press to meet him. I just said, if you ever want to come over to the studio, we're just on the other side of town. I understand you live in Beverly Hills. Why don't you come over? And I thought, okay, well, you know, you don't always get responses from people, but
sure.
What the heck? What the heck? I wrote my letter. I got it off my chest. So then Kevin Clash, who the original Elmo, myself, and a very good friend of mine named Karen Barnes, who was the head of Fox Children's Network at the time, former Muppet executive producer.
Okay.
Went to lunch one day, and we were over at, I think it was the Century City Mall. We were walking around just having a day. And we had been talking about Stan Freberg that day, and I was telling Karen that Kevin knew I had wrote this thing. And all of a sudden, Kevin said, there he is. And we look, and Stan Freberg walks by, and Karen, and he keeps going. He's with his wife. And I got a little bit of shakes. You know, I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Do I bother him or do I leave him alone? You know, I don't want to drive the guy crazy. And Karen turns to me, being with Fox Children's Network, and she says, oh, Stan Freberg, I know him. Do you want to meet him? We didn't know this. We hadn't gotten to that point in the conversation yet. And I said, do I? And she said, oh, well, he's pitched a couple ideas to us at Fox. You know, so I get an introduction right there in a shopping mall. And the funny part was Stan's wife, she sort of just like the minute she sees he's about to get confronted in public, just separates. She doesn't want to deal with being confronted in a shop. This is her day off, for crying out loud.
Of course.
So she goes over, and she's standing way over there, smoking a cigarette. And Stan will talk to you all day long. I mean, he was just this guy who the minute he would just stand there, he would go on forever. And she's probably thinking, could we, you know, there's a sale at Macy's. Could we please, you know, I don't know what she was thinking. But we were introduced, and he talked for quite a while. And I said, I'm sorry to bother you. You know, I wrote you this letter. And he said, oh, I have that letter on my desk. I'm sorry, I just hadn't got around to writing back. So he you know, so we had this conversation. And that was kind of the end of that. I mean, but we met. So that was the first meeting. And I told him what an influence he'd been on me, and I got to say that to him. About 3 or 4 months later, maybe longer, I'm flying between Atlanta and Los Angeles for a project. And I get on the plane, my wife and I are flying, and Stan gets on the plane, and he walks past me, and he's sitting a couple of rows behind me. So, I mean, I had to say hello.
Of course.
So once the flight gets off the ground, I go back and I say, sorry to bother you, but you may not remember this, but we met at the mall. I'm the guy who wrote the letter. And he said, oh, yeah, of course I remember. I'm so glad you said hello. Okay, so we part company. Then about 10 minutes later, he comes up the aisle, and he does about 30 minutes for me of Stan Freberg virtually performing for me on an airplane. We're flying along, and we're just laughing, and the people around us, I don't know whether they knew who he was. They probably did, but you've got this zany fellow with curly gray hair just giving me a whole performance. And part of that was because he evidently was writing a second or third book, and he was hoping I might be able to help him facilitate getting a photograph of himself with Jim Henson and Jane Henson at a point where he visited Jim during the shooting of Sam and Friends, Jim's
Oh
first
wow.
ever
Okay.
show.
Yeah.
And I tried. I was not able to facilitate that,
Oh.
but that photo I talked with Jane Henson. She had no, no recollection of
Dang
it.
it.
She remembered him being there, not of the photo.
Mm-hmm. Oh my
So
God.
that was my Stan Freberg experience in life. I mean, we had this couple of really great moments,
Yeah.
and I got to express to him what a great influence he'd been on me.
Oh, that's so wonderful. You know, I had never, because the thing, I'll be honest, I always assumed he would be a big old grouch. And I love that he was just like, oh no, I'm going to perform for this guy. This guy's, and also that his wife knows better. She's like, I'm not going to hang around the nerds. I'm just going to veer off, let
I'll
the
be
nerds
over
talk
here.
to Stan.
Well,
so
and
funny.
Stan did the thing that a
Delightful.
husband would do that would drive a wife crazy. We're standing at the shopping mall, and after we talked for a minute, he said something in the conversation came up about his wife. And he just basically says, "She's standing over there." We all turn and look, and she just goes, like cigarette in hand up, like, "Yeah, hello," I mean, I'm sure she was done with being confronted in public.
Of course.
But he was terrific. And he
That's
confirmed,
remarkable.
there's a story he tells online someplace where he confirmed on the airplane, he said, I'm the person who taught Jim how to make Kermit smile.
I love it. I love it.
And he had this thing he did with his hand where he was able to make Kermit push up on the sides of the mouth. Now, frankly, Jim, I never saw Jim use that move with Kermit.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it was something Jim had never done.
Yeah.
And Dan showed him this silly smile,
I love it.
So they had this little thing, and then I was able to share in it, which was really just
That's
a wonderful
great.
thing.
That's nice. I love it. No, those are nice moments, and it's nice when the generations get to kind of connect in that. Even though you obviously knew and worked with Jim, it's a nice, fun connection. It's interesting that you didn't make it until like later on.
Right.
Can we? I'm always curious about this. I always like to talk about archivists and stuff. How much of your own stuff do you have? Do you still have Otis? Do you still have any of your old stuff?
I have, unfortunately, very little.
Okay.
At the point in time when I was doing that early show, I was our studio was an office building in downtown Atlanta. And this broadcast legend in Atlanta who's still around, a guy named Don Kennedy, who's, I think Don's probably 90 at this point. Haven't had any contact in many years, but just someone I very much respect. He was a kid show host when I was a kid. When I was 6 years old, I was on his local live afternoon kid show. So fast forward about, 15 years, and I'm a teenager, and he sees me performing with this character I had built called Otis, who's this beach bum hippie freak guy. And I'm an 18-year-old. And then eventually he hired me because he was reviving a local UHF. Now, for people who don't know UHF, talk about vinyl. Same time frame. There was this little round antenna, that you put on top of your TV, and you had to tune in these channels on your television. And sometimes you got them, sometimes you didn't.
Yeah.
Static was part of the deal. And he started a local channel, and he was looking for programming, so he put me on the air 2.5 hours a day live, which is a long time.
Okay.
With my puppet.
Yeah.
And my friend Gary Kepke and I, who was also a puppeteer and a ventriloquist, did these characters. And we ran these old serials like Flash Gordon, black and white serials that would run for 15 minutes. And then we would fill the rest of that time taking phone calls from the locals who were watching. So children, a lot of adults, with no delay, by the way. So, if somebody wanted to call up and throw a few four-letter words in, they would get away with it. But that was that time, and that was Otis. So I don't have any of that because even though we recorded a little bit here and there, it was rare that we did. It was a live show.
Yeah.
And I don't have any of it.
Dang it.
It's a real shame. I still have the puppet, but the puppet is kind of falling apart. He's turning to toast, as we say in the puppet world.
Sure.
But he was just kind of who I was at the time.
Yeah. What did he sound like, if I can? I don't like to ask people to perform, but
well, he sounded like this. He was just kind of this fellow who was, he was just kind of a cool cat. He did his show, and but frankly, I'm putting more character into him now, trying to think back than I probably did at the time. He was like this is pre-Muppet Show. Muppet Show happened during this time frame.
Oh, yeah.
But he was the center of the wheel, and all these other characters revolved around him, very much like Kermit was.
Sure.
He was the host of the show, and my friend Gary did virtually every other character.
Yeah.
And we would just chatter. And Gary would go off and get another puppet, and the other puppet would come in.
I love
And
it.
they were very Muppet-like puppets, very Muppet-style puppets, moving mouths, eyes that could look at the camera, very focused, and that kind of stuff.
My God, I love it. So how long after doing all this stuff on your own did you then hop on the Muppet Show?
Well, it was almost immediately in a way. I did this show called The Kids Show with Otis in Atlanta, and that lasted for about 6 months.
Okay.
And it was fortunate, even though because we had 8-foot ceilings in this place, we had to lie on our backs on the floor to do the puppets.
Jeez.
So imagine lying on your back with the puppet in the air. We had one
Doesn't
monitor.
work.
No, and it's not easy. And I would literally, we had a guy. Sometimes we had a camera operator. Sometimes we didn't. It was a very small channel, and the multi-line telephone was next to me. All the lights were flashing. I'd have the puppet on, reaching up, doing the puppet, and I'd take the next call and I'd say, "Hey, how are you?" And we'd go on from there. So if there was one of those instances where somebody needed to cut off, I had to do that as well. So hit the wrong button and you cut off 3 callers. But so that ran into the time where I met Carol Spinney in Atlanta, who was Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch.
Yeah.
Carol came to Atlanta for a puppetry festival, a Southeastern regional thing, and I really didn't know these things existed. I've been a puppeteer at that point, probably mostly on a kind of a hobbyist level.
Sure.
For maybe 8 or 9 years, but I didn't know that there were these gatherings. So I was determined to go to this thing because I found out that Carol Spinney was going to be there. Not because I was looking for a job, because I was so young, it didn't cross my mind that a job would be out there.
Of course.
I just wanted, I was such a Muppet fanatic. I wanted to meet someone who worked for the Muppets that I had watched for years and had been inspired by all these people. And meeting Carol around that time was eventually, without even me thinking it was going to happen, he's the person who recruited me into the Muppets. So it sort of overlapped a bit between my work with Channel 36 in Atlanta and my Muppet time. And it was helpful because they were actually able to help me put together a little video demo tape when the time came that I needed to do that to send for Jim to see.
Yeah. Holy cow.
Yeah. It was a really interesting time. I've been putting together a new website, and part of that was trying to put together a timeline.
Yeah.
Of the things. I'm going to keep adding to this for the rest of my life.
Of course.
But right now I haven't put the website online yet, but I'm up to the point where about 1983, so the 70s are covered. And in 1977, there's just so much stuff that happened. It just goes on forever. The Kids Show with Otis, and I met Carol Spinney, and all this stuff happened all along that time. And then I met Jim, and that was the year that it all came together.
That's crazy. That is not just out of high school then, basically.
Just barely, yeah.
Good God.
My very first professional puppet job. I mean, I've been getting paid little bits of money to do birthday parties and the things you do.
Sure.
Starting out for a long time, a couple of corporate things. And my first real job was with Sid and Marty Krofft.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was this massive theme park that they built here, an indoor theme park. In the building that is now, the space they were in has been converted to CNN.
Oh, okay.
This 8-level building at the CNN Center, which at the time was the Omni International with a hotel and all that stuff. Oh, wow, and part of the attraction was the world of Sid and Marty Krofft, which unfortunately, it was a pretty cool place, but it went out of business. They went bankrupt 6 months after they opened. Yeah, all of the bankers and investors were out of state. And the idea was that this was going to be a year-round thing because it was indoors. It was not weather dependent.
I'm sure. Okay.
But when all the kids went back to school, it didn't matter that it was indoor because the attendance dropped and they went bankrupt. But for me, it was a dream come true job for a guy. I hadn't graduated high school yet, and I was already going to school every afternoon. I'd drive down to the World of Sid and Marty Krofft and do Otis. The weird part of that is, as you will understand, they wanted me and let me use a character that they did not own in their theme park, which allowed me to kind of, to whatever extent I was capable at the time, develop this character. And he got to be known around Atlanta because of the World of Sid and Marty Krofft.
I love it. That's
I mean,
crazy.
nobody would do that now in the theme park. No one would let you
No.
use your own characters.
No, not at all. And if they did, they'd be like, okay, I'm buying that. Thank you. That is now my intellectual property. I own notice.
Exactly.
Wow.
Very different times, you know.
Holy cow. Am I entirely wrong that by the time the Muppet Show rolls around, is that the first time that Kermit is cemented as Kermit? Because he'd been rather nebulous before that, right? As a character.
Well, I think broadly to the broad audience that might be true.
Yeah.
Jim had done, Kermit evolved from being just this sort of abstract thing, which is what all the Muppets were. Some of them were kind of more humanoid than others, but Kermit was not meant to be a frog for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But he developed into a frog around the Sesame Street years.
Oh, what am I thinking? My brain is, the timeline is fried. Yeah, of course,
right.
Sesame
I know,
Street.
and it all overlaps so much. And then Jim did 3 specials during the early 70s, which is after Sesame Street. He did a thing called The Frog. Hey Cinderella was the first one.
Yes, right, yeah.
Which is all over the place. It's this weird, amazing thing to watch. The Frog Prince, which obviously centered a lot around Kermit.
Right.
And then a thing called The Muppet Musicians of Bremen.
Yes.
And Kermit was not in the story, but he narrated a little bit. So that's sort of, Kermit had already become a frog, but it was the worldwide success of the Muppet Show that people, I think, remembered. You know, after the first season of that show, it really became the biggest thing on the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, just worldwide mega success, which, you know, it was like Jim had been trying to sell the idea of a primetime show for a very long time, and in the States. And he was not able to do that because he had been so successful with Sesame Street. Most of the major networks loved his work, but thought it was too much for kids to do something in prime time.
Yeah.
And the story is there's a man named Lou Grade who was a massively well-known, you know, kind of one of those old-fashioned Hollywood, only he was in the UK, guys with a cigar, who said, you know, come over and shoot this at my studio and we'll syndicate it back to the States.
Yeah.
And I think Jim sort of came close to turning it down. Syndication didn't sound like the way to go.
Yeah.
But he did that, and we shot that show. I joined in the 3rd season, but that was a UK thing that was put back here.
Yeah.
So it was such a massive success.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I can't believe, by the way, my brain skips Sesame Street when that is the reason I learned how to read as a kid. I mean, come on, how do you forget that? My goodness gracious. Did you ever do any of the Sesame Street stuff? I'm realizing I don't have that in front of me, so I don't know.
Yeah.
You did, okay.
Well, when Jim initially hired me, he was looking to sort of establish a separate team of puppeteers who could do some new characters on Sesame Street, because he was suddenly becoming so busy because the Muppet Show, him and his core team were not as available to do Sesame Street as they had been. And he would have to bank all the Ernie and Bert pieces with Frank Oz and things like that. So the daily shows, the street stuff, he needed new people with new characters, and some of those people are still there today. So initially, it looked as though I might be hired to be a part of that team, which also worked with us on many other things too. But mostly, they were originally thought of as a new Sesame Street team. But as it turned out, for whatever reason, Jim decided to bring me straight to London to be a part of the Muppet Show, which was fortunate. I never worked on Sesame Street in those years, and it was fortunate for me because that's where people like Frank and Jerry Nelson and Richard Hunt and the main core group were focused. And in a way, had I gotten established on Sesame Street at that point, it would have been less opportunity for me to learn directly working with Jim and his original performers.
Yeah.
So Jim basically used me for everything except Sesame Street. I think it might have been a little bit intentional. For whatever it was that he saw in me, whatever capacity it was, he chose to keep me for all the other stuff he wanted to do, which is fine. I mean, that was great.
Yeah.
I was working all the time, and it was just an incredible time to be a part of that. So I didn't work on, to answer your original question, I didn't work on Sesame Street until after Jim's death.
Okay, right. So you makes sense.
At which point I was Ernie for about 24 years.
Yeah.
Doing one of Jim's characters.
Do you, what was the first character you got to originate that was a Muppet?
Well, even though the idea for the character did not come from me, the first character that became anything at all to the extent that it did was this character called Fufu, who's Miss Piggy's little poodle.
Oh, of course.
I think the idea of the character came from Frank and the writers, Frank doing Piggy. And Piggy, Fufu was basically like an accessory for Miss Piggy. It was an extension of Miss Piggy. It was this sort of, obnoxious little dog that was, yappy little dog that Miss Piggy would have, And the concept with this character was that they actually had an actual little toy poodle kind of dog, this little tiny guy, that was a real dog, and the puppet was built to look exactly like the real dog. And I got to work on the design to the extent that I came up with this idea that if my hand was inside of the head, I could take my first finger and pinky finger, and if they build it properly, I could put my fingers inside of that dog's ears. And so the dog could then have an alert expression and then have a panting expression where the ears were down. The ears could go up, the ears could go down. And it added a little something to that dog, which allowed it to seamlessly sort of, go from the actual dog to the other dog. So we would do these things in real scenes where Fufu, the real dog, would walk into a scene and go like behind a set piece, and the puppet dog would come out on the other side. So it started this sort of idea for me of trying to do characters that were very organic and biological in the way that they worked, which Jim commented on a few times, that was sort of the direction I went in. My style of puppeteering was to come up with not just the zany Muppet look, which is fun and fantastic, but how do you make something look alive?
Yeah.
And so that's sort of been a lot of my focus over the years, to mix those two and decide where you draw the line between the extremes.
Sure. My goodness. I love that so much. It hadn't even occurred to me that that would be your first. That is remarkable. Oh,
yeah,
my goodness.
It was a cool start.
Yeah, of course. Oh, that's so good. Where did, other than the name, I know where the name comes from, but Rizzo's origin, I'm realizing I don't even know Rizzo's origin, much as I love Rizzo.
Yeah, well, Rizzo was probably the first character that I did Fufu had a character, but Rizzo was the start of doing a character that had a little bit more depth to him. We were doing a show, I don't remember which Muppet show it was. It was within the early years of my time there. And there was a storage area under, they had bleachers that were audience bleachers, although we didn't actually have a live audience, but the studio we were in could accommodate a live audience. We just never did that.
Sure.
And under there was all this storage. So all these puppets had been shipped over from New York, everything that there was, just in case they needed a puppet. And so one of my favorite things to do was, when I wasn't working, was to go in there and open these cardboard boxes and look at all these puppets that I'd grown up with from all these specials Jim had done. These original Muppet characters. I could take them out and look at them,
Crazy.
Excuse me. I don't have a cough button. And so I found this box full of, it was a box that said rats on the side, and I thought, well, considering where this was stored, there could be some real ones in there. So I opened this thing up, and there were these little, pretty poorly made, but remarkable puppets that were rat puppets that were made out of, I don't know whether you remember the old sort of quart-size Clorox bottles, but they were shaped like a bowling pin.
Oh, wow.
This is like back in the 60s.
Okay.
And someone had taken those bottles and made the body out of that. So you can imagine this little round fat body.
Holy crap.
And it was on about a 3-foot long dowel stick with a little lever down here. Some of them didn't even have working mouths, but that's how they worked. And so the little head, they were terrible puppets to do anything more than have them just run through a scene with. Because you had no real control over this thing on a long, long stick. But I thought they were great. So I pulled one out of a box. So traditionally, when we would shoot the backstage scenes on the Muppet Show, I don't really remember the backstage, but Kermit was at his desk, and there were just lots of characters populating this area.
Yeah.
And the main scene took place up near the camera where Kermit was at his desk, and Jim was down there. Jim would say to all of us who were newer, the new puppeteers, just grab any puppet you want and do whatever you want in the background, just upstage and have fun. And that was our learning time on the Muppet Show. He didn't care what we did. We could do anything. And the sillier, the better. He encouraged us to draw the attention away from what they were doing downstage. So it was kind of a challenge. So I got one of these rats one day. Kermit's at his desk, and this particular scene, I seem to remember Kermit had a whole bunch of stuff he had to look at the desk and read, and he was talking to Fozzie or Piggy or other characters. So on Kermit's other side, this little rat pops up, and he just stands there. And he just stands there, he looks at Kermit, and Kermit would say something, Kermit would check his piece of paper, and the little rat would look at the piece of paper. And then Kermit would look back, and the rat would read, and then he would look up at Kermit, look at the other guy, and he was like, looked at camera a couple of times. He was just there. He didn't say a word, he just was there. So we shot this thing, and Jim finished the scene, and the moment they said cut, Jim cracked up. He just started laughing to the point of where, and Jim would laugh sometimes to the point where he almost had tears. And he turned to me and he said, "Where did you find that puppet? It's terrible." And I said, "Well, the box of rats from, I think it was from Musicians of Bremen or whatever it was from." And he said, "I'm going to make that rat a star." And he said, "I want you to think about how to rebuild. We got to rebuild it, make it a better puppet." So he set me on this task, to redesign it, rebuild it. And I came up with a way, first of all, to get rid of that long stick, because you'd move your hand this much and up here it's moving that much.
Yeah, right.
I came up with an idea to get my hand inside of the body. And I worked with one of the top puppet builders ever, who's still doing it, a lady named Jane Gutnick, a wonderful person, helped me redesign Rizzo.
Wow.
And suddenly it was a character. So that was his original origins. He didn't get good until probably Muppets Take Manhattan. That was about 5 years later. But,
which might be the most complicated rat choreography in the history of film. I mean, let's be honest. That's some of my favorite stuff of all time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and all pure puppetry. I mean, some blue and green screen technique for what it's worth at the time, but mostly it was just pure puppets. That the toast pops out and he gets caught on a plate. We really did that.
Love it.
And the one in the batter was really like a rubber sleeve with a character in a bowl full of batter, and all that stuff was really practical effects.
My goodness, that is so remarkable. How about the voice?
Rizzo's voice? Well, we all have, I think every puppeteer and every voice person has probably 2 or 3 voices that come naturally to them.
Sure, yeah.
And then you work on trying to expand that repertoire. But everybody's got maybe a falsetto, or maybe a tight little pinched voice. Everybody's got one. And that just happened to be one that was that style of voice, that type of voice was one that came naturally to me. And the big change in Rizzo was, and this is because I would never even pretend to have been an actor of any caliber whatsoever at the point in time when I started. My background, as I said, was in the puppetry. So Rizzo's first appearance as the leader of the Rats, I think it was on the Christopher Reeve show, and they were like a union who had come in to complain. And Rizzo was supposed to be the leader, but then I had Jerry Nelson and Richard Hunt, 2 true actors, 2 incredibly accomplished voice people, who also, by the way, happened to spend, they weren't from there originally, but spent their lives in New York City. So they had a New York accent. I didn't have one. I couldn't do a New York accent.
Sure.
I'm a guy from Atlanta. What did I know? But yet Rizzo was supposed to be the strongest. And they were just, their characters, not on purpose, but were just like pushing Rizzo to the back. And Rizzo was supposed to be the guy in charge. And I thought, God, I don't know. I can't compete with those 2 characters. They're too strong. And they were trying to just be supportive.
Yeah.
So I could do that voice. But Rizzo didn't really develop his New York sort of accent for about 5 years. It took me about 5 years to get good at that. So the voice was there, but the character was a different thing. It took a long, long time.
You're now making me realize that one of my default voices is probably Wembley, one that I have definitely stolen about 1 million times, like a variation on it, because I mean, I don't know, just one of my favorite voices.
Well, Wembley's voice is pretty much the same as Rizzo's voice. There's very little difference except for character differences. The voice is essentially the same. Rizzo's is deeper and it's got the New York sound to it, and Wembley was a little bit more pure and higher, and his voice would break a bit more. but we also did a show called The Bunny Picnic, and I did this character
Yeah.
called Bean Bunny, and Bean's voice is still the same voice with a little bit of a stuffy nose, and he's a little bit more of a young kid.
Yeah.
And when we did that show, I had already done both Rizzo and Wembley, and I said to Jim, I just want to do a different character voice, Jim. I don't want to, and I just keep using the same one over and over again. I really wanted to do something better. And he liked what I was doing with Bean Bunny.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember this very definitely. We were walking across the soundstage together, and I said, I got to do something different. And he said, well, and at the time, Burt Reynolds was a huge actor, Cannonball Run, all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Burt Reynolds, every time he does a different film, he uses the same voice. And, and I said, wow, you're right. And he said, I wouldn't worry about the voice. He didn't care at all that I was doing the same thing over and over again.
I love it.
But that has always stuck with me. And I thought, you know what? What that said to me too was, and I started listening to Jerry Nelson's voices, who was out of this world.
Yeah, yeah.
And I realized that even though we thought of Jerry as the man of 1,000 voices, Jerry's voices, it was very subtle between a lot of them. It was far more about character than it was about a change in the voice.
Yeah.
I
mean, if you had to worry about that, then, you'd have to worry about Kermit and Ernie sounding as much as they sound alike.
Exactly.
Or every other growly voiced voice that Jim did was kind of the same voice. But, I mean, there's this, there's how it actually looks, but there's so much character you can put in the hands. Exactly. I'm wondering, are you ambidextrous because you have to do so much handwork, or have you become ambidextrous?
I am not as much as I'd like to be. No. I went through a phase one time where I had broken a bone in my right hand while we were shooting, like working around the house at home. And during Fraggle Rock, I snapped a little bone in this part of my hand. So it was, so then we're back into production. I'm in the middle of doing Wembley, and it was either, what was I going to do? I wanted to keep going. So I had to learn to do Wembley and Sprocket left-handed.
Wow. Okay.
And it looked really terrible for about the first day.
Okay.
And then I found that I was kind of able to adapt to it a little bit. I was not as proficient with my left hand, but the same principles apply. But it was like learning, it was like what I can imagine somebody walking in off the street who's never put on a Muppet-like puppet before, having to learn the basics.
Of course, yeah.
And then I kind of was okay with it, But I did. It's not like I kept doing that to stay better at it.
Yeah.
I was always much stronger with my right hand.
Oh my goodness gracious. I cannot imagine the panic that must have set in for a minute when you realize, oh shit, I can't use this hand.
Oh, and I'm sure for the production too, because it was
right.
There's nobody else who could do it, at that time.
Oh my goodness. There are about a billion things I could ask you about, but I also don't want to keep you for the rest of the day. So
not to worry.
I do want to at the very least ask you, well, I think we've already established your favorite track off of this album is Rock Island Line. We have established that, right?
I think as I've gotten older, Rock Island Line is my favorite off of this Dan Freberg particular album. The one that I remember the most is probably Yellow Rose of Texas, because I actually performed that with puppets. So those two I really like.
So you probably got a little bit of sense memory that goes. So if I gave you if you had two puppets right now, you could probably do it. Like if it were to come to it.
You know what? I could probably. You know how it is. You learn music, and then 40 years later, you still remember every word and every little nuance of the music. I wish I could clear that hard disk space out sometimes, make room for more stuff that I need to actually remember.
Yeah.
But it's like anything. Once you really learn it, for me, it's like the guitar solo in the middle of a Pink Floyd song, something in the Wall. I know it by heart. I know the guitar solo in the middle of Bohemian Rhapsody. If I had a character air guitaring that, I could play it and it would look exactly like they were playing it, because it's there.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the Freberg stuff. I could probably hit about 95% of the inflections on every word.
Yeah.
It's forever ingrained.
That's so good. Is there any video of you doing that out there? Or is that all too old to have survived any of that?
There's not. Somewhere I have if I could find it, a piece of silent Super 8 film of that talent show. But it's not the whole show. It's going to be moments.
Sure, of course.
Just moments of us doing Yellow Rose of Texas.
That's so good. I would love to see
I have it someplace.
Please get that digitized.
I recently got a bunch of old Super 8 stuff transferred to digital video. And it's that was my thing during my early days. I had more time on my hand, So Jim encouraged me to shoot behind the scenes stuff all the time.
Oh my goodness.
Of our work, and I've got stuff nobody has ever seen it publicly.
My God.
So someday maybe,
I hope so. That's got to get turned into something. That's remarkable.
I got to figure out how, these days, how you go about using it. I don't know.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, because technically you've got all this stuff that is technically intellectual property, blah, 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 blah,
It
blah.
kind of is.
But it's so important.
There was no me shooting it. It's just a matter of, and it's like any other kind of stuff. You own it once you shoot it.
Yeah.
So technically I own it. So, I'd like to find a respectful way of using it at some point.
Sure.
The fans would love to see it.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. I'm going to ask you a couple other questions, but I would love to know, were there other comedy albums you grew up with? Because, there are households that I think had just the comedy music, but did you have any stand-up or anything else?
The only stand-up I ever recall during those years, and this was sort of very quickly on the Freberg, the original one I had, it would be comedy on lacquer, I think, because it was a 78.
Okay,
my mom had these
okay.
78s, and I accidentally broke many of those platters of my mom's. She was not amused. There was another one from those days that was a 78 RPM album or recording called "It's in the Book," which is by this guy named Johnny Stanley.
Okay.
It's out there. I found it on the internet in prep of talking to you.
Okay.
And it went straight into a song called Grandma's Lye Soap. It's meant to be this kind of, I think he's meant to be like a Southern preacher.
Okay.
And he's taking apart the fairy tale of Little Bo Peep. It's Freberg like before Freberg.
Yeah.
But this is one everybody should hear. It's out there. Somebody's got it on YouTube.
Yeah, I do see that. Okay, I'm going to have to listen to this later.
Yeah, and then the original Freberg one that I heard was Yellow Rose of Texas, also this scratchy album. And then fortunately, by the time I got to high school and was trying to put these things together for high school things, I had a friend whose father had quite an extensive vinyl collection. One of the things he had was this album, A Child's Garden of Freberg, which is the one that we're referring to. It's all these different things. And I think he gave me the album because he knew what a fanatic I was.
Yeah.
Although I say that, I might have recorded it off because I don't recall having it now. But anyway, and I used all of these for various puppet characters,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was, but you were asking about stand-up. During that time frame, too, the Flip Wilson show happened.
Oh, yeah.
And he did such strong characters. There was so much of that culture, of that sort of late 60s, early 70s time frame, was such a part of forming where I was headed. As again, you only had really 3 network channels, and it was real appointment television. You saw it or you didn't see it. You couldn't go back and watch it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so we had a couple of, my parents, because we loved Flip Wilson, got a couple of his stand-up albums. But the funniest thing I recall about it, and I'll never forget this, is my mom and I put on the Flip Wilson album of one of his live shows. And in his live shows, he used a lot of 4-letter words that he couldn't use on television.
He did.
And, we were this Southern kind of family, and all of a sudden the innocent Flip Wilson stuff was filled with all this stuff. And I remember my mom looking at me like, because I was a little kid by her standards. And she let us continue to listen to it, but there was a lot of trepidation about, oh my God, this is who Flip Wilson is. So, we knew the difference, so it didn't matter. But
I love it.
But it was stuff that normally might not have come into our fairly, Southern conservative household,
Holy
But
cow.
I loved Flip Wilson. We loved him, and we didn't. It didn't affect our tuning in because we loved him.
Yeah.
And
I
Jim,
love
of course, Jim was on that show with the Muppets.
Oh, Christmas!
So I got to see Jim perform. It was amazing.
Oh, that's remarkable. My goodness. Well, I always like to ask people why you would recommend this album to listen, because we're talking to an audience. Some are people probably between, or roughly in ages that you and I fall into.
Sure,
a bunch of white guys. There might be some younger people listening who maybe don't even know who Freberg is. So why listen to this album as your first delving into Freberg?
I think he did a lot of other types of work. He did a lot of political humor that it didn't draw me at the time because it wasn't what I was into as a teenager. And I think I think it's possible for anyone interested in any sort of performing arts to appreciate the interplay between these characters. I think even today, even though the music is from a bygone age, you can understand why it would have been so popular, because it was the top music at the time he did it.
Sure.
In the 50s. And he was making fun of it in a way that nobody else was doing. And nobody's doing it today like this.
Right.
There's nothing better to me than parodying anything. I'm a ridiculously corny pun person. And that's a big part of the Muppets. And I just love the idea of taking popular things and doing a slant on them. And so that's what he was doing at the time. It may not be as funny to people now because the music is not as popular, but if you listen to the original and you listen to what he was doing, you can at least understand the sophistication of what he was doing.
Definitely.
Yeah. I would say listen to it just for that reason alone.
Yeah, you know, there are lots of times on this podcast when we bring up what I would like to call homework comedy, where you really have to know some references if you're not old enough. Like, but I had to do that as a kid too. I also had to just like assume, like, it's a good thing I weirdly was a fan of old commercials, or I wouldn't have gotten a lot of references on some stand-up records or sketch records. You know. My goodness. I first of all, thank you for doing the show. That's number one.
You're very welcome. Yeah, of course.
And second of all, thank you for the just thousands of hours of entertainment you've given me. And, you know, even though I never became a professional puppeteer, you were definitely part of me wanting to be and loving it as much as I did for as long. I still do. I mean, I've got a whatnot up here. I use it every once in a while. So come on. I love it. And you've just been a huge part of me loving comedy and entertainment and everything. So thank you very much for that. It's a huge honor to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. And it's nice to reminisce about some of this other stuff. And, you know, I'm still trying to use that stuff today with the stuff I'm doing.
Sure.
You know, I'm still trying to, I would say Freberg is even affecting, I'm doing this little thing called Cave-In, we'd always do musical numbers. And I'm coming up with all the music, and it's a lot of parodies. I mean, actually it's an extension of Freberg as much as it would be an extension of my work with Jim.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Tell people where to find that and where to find you.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm out there on Instagram mostly. I have a Facebook page, which I frequent, but mostly the best way to find me right now is Instagram. As we record this in August here, I'm just on the verge of starting a new website, which is going to have a lot of fun stuff, including a new blog,
nice.
where people can submit questions and ideas to me, and I'll write blog posts in answer to those ideas. I like working that way. That way I'm not writing a bunch of boring stuff people don't care about. I'm responding to their questions about Muppets and other things too. I'm also doing this monthly live stream called Cave-In with a new character called Weldon the IT Guy. In about a week and a half, we'll do our 1-year anniversary show. Wow. So we've been doing it every month for a year. And we've settled into a time frame that is generally the last Friday of every month, 10 p.m. EST. So wherever you are in the world, you can find us on YouTube. The YouTube channel is Cave-In with a hyphen in the middle. And if you can't find it, there are a couple other things that takes you to on Cave-In, like actual Cave-Ins. So you can just search Weldon the IT Guy, and it'll pop right up.
There we go.
Also, there's a link on my Instagram page to get there, and there'll be links on the website, so forth and so on. But Weldon's a fun character. It really harkens back to what we were talking about earlier about this character called Otis. One of the things I have always wanted to find a way to go back to doing over the years was, and by the way, it's the thing I love the most with Kermit, were the live, spontaneous, improvised, it's that stuff where there's no script. Yeah. And it's almost completely that with Weldon, just like it was with Otis, and just like it often was with Kermit. Yeah. And I'm taking phone calls again, only this time we do it on the internet on a Discord server. And it's the viewers calling in and talking to Weldon. And we talk about whatever. Weldon is an internet troll. And so his motive is to hack into websites and be an obnoxious guy to the extent that I can do that without alienating anybody. I don't want to do that. Of course. So it's a sort of a light version of that, but he's more edgy than any of the Muppets have been in that regard. And what he wants to know is when you call in, he wants to know the most miserable thing that's happened to you in your life since last month's show. And so the show focuses on your misery from Weldon's point of view. So he's broadcasting live from an underground cave, and he's, he doesn't want to get discovered. He's hacking into YouTube, all that kind of stuff. So I'm having a great time with him for now.
I love it. That's a lot of fun. Well, everybody should obviously make sure to check that out. Follow you everywhere they can follow you. Boy, oh boy, I don't know what else to say except, again, thank you. This has been so much fun. You're welcome back anytime. That's the other thing I should say. If you'd like to come back and talk about another comedy record, I would love to, because I know you had a lot.
Well, yeah, sure. I'd love to. We'll find a time, when it makes sense.
Sure, of course.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank everybody for listening. And as always, have a good thing. Comedy on Vinyl is a production of StolenDress Entertainment. It is produced by Mike Warden and is hosted and edited by Jason Klom. Our theme song was composed and performed by Richard Levinson. You can email us at podcast@comedyonvinyl.com. You can also send snail mail to StolenDress Entertainment, P.O. Box 805, Burbank, California, 91503. Subscribe to Comedy on Vinyl on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you can find podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It helps. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Comedy on Vinyl, or find everything in one place at comedyonvinyl.com. A major portion of Comedy on Vinyl has been underwritten by Stand Up Records. Please visit standuprecords.com for all your comedy needs, and tune in to the new Stand Up Records channel available on the Roku, where you can also find select episodes of this podcast. Visit StolenDress.com to listen to our other podcasts, watch videos, and imbibe freely of our multimedia content going back 15 plus years. StolenDress Entertainment.
Hey, it's my turn. Ah!